There are, of course, plenty of stocks out there, but that doesn't necessarily mean that most of them are any good. Today we're going to be looking at 3 stocks in particular that are cheap, starting with Logitech. Now, 73% over the last 5 years maybe doesn't jump out to you as something that's incredible. However, when you zoom out on Logitech, it starts to look very, very good. Early 2015, the stock price was only around 15, meaning you've dramatically outperformed the S&P 500 over the last decade. Even over the last 5 years, you kind of haven't. Although if you bought 5 years ago, you probably would have been very happy with the run-up in 2021, where shares reached above 110, around 115. You could have sold somewhere in this range and been really happy. Also, there was pretty low lows in 2022, around 45. A lot of stocks had this. But Logitech specifically is cheap because we can see the PE here is 18.5. The S&P 500 PE right now is about 30, so you're dramatically under it. If we're looking at forward PE, because sometimes that's better, forward PE is 16 here, so this is a stock that is growing. It didn't just have a crazy earnings and is coming down, although it had that fairly recently. This is a stock that, compared to the S&P 500, which is forward PE is about 23, you're at 16, so you're dramatically cheaper, and you're a stock for the last 10 years that's outperformed. Now, what Logitech specifically does, they do a lot of mouses, keyboards, simple appliances like that. Yeah, you're never going to have that top-end crazy performance where you just do 300% in like a year or something like that, unless the stock is like crazy undervalued. However, I still think this is a company that does important things and has a value hold, a hold where, hey, the PE is low. If there was a recession or something like that, this stock wouldn't be hit nearly as hard as something like a growth stock, just because of perceptions of specific stocks, and probably the underlying business would do pretty well as well. So I think Logitech is a cheap alternative if you want a company that historically has performed well. I think it's also international though, so that might complicate some things. But anyways, I like Logitech. I think it's a fine, cheap value play. Meta is the next one we're looking at. Over the last 5 years, up 188%. That's clearly good. I assume most of you know what Meta does. However, we are technically below the S&P 500 level of 30. We're at 28.5. That's pretty good. And like I said, you're outperforming. So the S&P 500 is up about 90% over the last 5 years or so. This has doubled that. So you're getting something that's technically cheaper and has doubled the performance. Most of you know what Meta's done recently. They're around 300. They fell all the way to in the 90s. They were pouring a lot of money in the metaverse. People were like making fun of them basically. And then now they've just gone on an insane run since then. I really am not scared to buy Meta at these prices. I probably am personally going to. If you look at the rest of the Mag 7, probably there's quite a few that are more expensive. I think Google's the only one that's kind of cheaper. Apple's probably right around this range, a bit above 30. But you get some like the Teslas and the Nvidias have much higher PE. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing inherently wrong with buying those growth-centric stocks. However, if you want to get out of some of the high PE stuff, you want to hedge a little bit, I think Meta is a good alternative in the Mag 7 that is relatively cheap, right? It's not like crazy cheap. If you look at historical PEs, it's really not that cheap. But in terms of like PEs now, and you're right around the S&P 500 for PE as well at 23. And Meta is pouring a lot of money into AI. They're one of the largest companies in the entire world. $1.5 trillion market cap. They have huge brands. I'm not worried about Meta as a long-term hold. And I think, honestly, if we're talking about the area that it's in, counter to its peers, and just kind of in general, it is a relatively cheap stock. Now, the last one is another actually legit super cheap stock, 16.26 PE, Kroger. I've probably talked about it in one of these videos before, and I don't care because I think it's a very, very good choice right now. At 16.5 PE, if your company's growing at that level of these level of PEs right now, that is a good bargain. Somewhere in that 15 range is basically projected to not grow, or at least go relatively flat for the future. You can kind of see stocks around that range, and that's kind of true. Kroger has performed well over the last 5 years, up 114%. Yeah, about a decade ago, it was at highs, so it doesn't really look as good in the 10-year performance. However, if you go to 2012, it actually looks pretty good as well. It just had a massive run-up leading to that. This is a stock that's performed well. I expect Kroger to continue to. There's not a whole lot of its peers that are relatively cheap. I mean, Target is, but it's has kind of falling revenue. A lot of the customers have moved on. Walmart has higher PE, so it's valued like a growth stock, even though it's a fine growth stock, but it's not like a cheap stock. Same with Costco, great growth stock. It's not really cheap. And during a recession, Kroger is probably going to perform very well. I would assume so, at least the stock price. Of course, when everything falls at the beginning, that's just how things work. However, Kroger has a low enough PE and is a business that's going to do well during a recession that I think they will. Also, Ford PE 13.3. This is a growing company as well. I really, really, really like Kroger. I own it personally. I've done videos on it in the past. I think Kroger is a great, cheap alternative to a lot of its peers. Also a solid dividend as well. Or even if this ran flat for a while, you would expect over 2%. Kroger is a really, really, really nice play, in my opinion. Of course, this is not advice for anyone. There's very few stocks. If you're looking for cheap, you're looking for growth, you're looking for just a combination of everything, that this is probably about as good as you can get. So anyways, I appreciate all of you for watching this video. If you enjoyed, if you're new here, I'd appreciate if you liked or subscribed. I do daily stock content on this channel, including compilations like this, or I dive deeper into stocks as well in other videos. So appreciate you all for watching. I'll catch you next time.